I'd like to welcome you to the Road to the White House. I'm David Caputo, Professor of Political Science at Pace University in New York City. And I'm speaking to you the day after the April 26 primaries. These are an important set of 5 primaries: Rhode Island, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Maryland. Important for both candidates and both parties. Let's start for a moment and spend a few minutes talking about the Donald Trump's win. First of all, he won all 5. He won in all cases with a higher percentage than people expected. And it also was the first round of primaries after the supposed Cruz-Kasich agreement to try to target states. None of these states were targeted as part of the agreement. Nonetheless, it appears that the Cruz-Kasich efforts to block Donald Trump were not successful in these particular states. In fact, as important as these victories were for Trump, the defeats were equally important for Kasich and for Cruz. For Cruz, almost no delegates in these states. For Kasich, states that he should have, and people would have predicted that he would have done well in, especially Pennsylvania, since he was born and raised in western Pennsylvania, and many people thought some of the allegiance to him in Ohio would carry over to Pennsylvania. It clearly did not. So these are major victories for Donald Trump. Trump stands, according to the Associated Press delegate tracker, as of this morning, with 950 delegates, which means he needs 287 to go. Cruz needs 677 to go. Kasich needs 1,084 delegates in order to win the nomination. Now, the problem, there's only 422 delegates left. So clearly, Cruz and Kasich do not have a path to the nomination except to get it to go to a second ballot. And in addition, Trump only needs 287 of the remaining 422. All right, now, clearly going forward, Indiana and California hold the key. Indiana's 57 on May the 6th, on May the 3rd, and California's 172 on June the 7th. Indiana is winner-take-all at the state level for 30, and then 9 congressional districts with 3 delegates in each of those districts for a total of 57. Clearly, this is Cruz's last effort, and I would argue it's probably going to be a futile effort to block Trump's road to the nomination. If Trump is able to win the statewide and gain 30 delegates and 3 or 4 of the congressional districts, that would put him at 42, okay, which means now he's down to the low 200s in terms of what he needs. So I think it's very difficult to block him at this point. And also remember that after the primaries are done in June and before the conventions in July, there's going to be a lot of movement in terms of his and the other candidates trying to get various delegates. So I would say that when Donald Trump said last night he presumed and assumed that he was going to be the nominee for the Republicans, I think that was a very fair statement for him to make. All right, so he's set, I think, for a clear first ballot victory if he can clear Indiana, and that will be an interesting test for him. Democrats, Clinton stands at 2,141, including the superdelegates, 519. Sanders at 1,321, including his 39 superdelegates. So Sanders needs 1,062, okay, and Clinton needs 242, and there's 988 remaining. So I think that it's very clear it's going to be next to impossible for Senator Sanders to win. Now the key will be, and the Democrats have to figure out how to manage bringing Sanders and his supporters back in to the Clinton coalition. This is not going to be easy. It's not easy because Senator Sanders has run a proud campaign and a very successful campaign in many respects. And he stands for principle, and he stands for issues that he and his followers feel strongly about. One encouraging thing for the Democrats is that as Democratic voters left the poll yesterday, those who voted for Sanders, only about 15% indicated that they would not vote for Clinton in the fall. Those who voted for Cruz and Kasich because they left the poll said they would not vote for Trump at about 25 to 30%. So you can see that's an important drop-off. Now, going forward, okay, we're going to see both candidates begin to shift to attacks on one another. If you go to C-SPAN and look at Donald Trump's victory speech last night in New York City, clearly laid out what his attacks are going to be: trade, jobs, immigration, and complete personal attack on Mrs. Clinton in terms of the only thing she has going for her was supposedly the woman's card, and he argued without that she wouldn't even get 5% of the vote. So we can see the outlines, at least preliminarily, of what the Trump campaign is going to look like. Both parties still have to worry about their conventions. Even if it's decided in both before you go into the convention, you can still have things happen that can disrupt and bother that convention. On the part of the Democrats, it will be fights over the platform. On the part of the Republicans, could be fights over the platform and also over control of the party. So one of the important things, and I'll be discussing this in another lecture, is the candidates who are running for the Senate and House seats and the gubernatorial seats that are up in 2016. We'll have to make a decision pretty quickly, and that is, do they run with Clinton? Do they run with Trump? And we've seen some evidence that most Democratic contenders will be running with Mrs. Clinton, but we've seen some evidence that some of the Republicans may decide to distance themselves from Donald Trump. So that remains to be seen. So anything unexpected? Clinton versus Trump in the fall. One other interesting point, which I will not have time to get into at great depth today, and that is, who will they select as vice presidents? Okay? The usual thinking now is that you select a vice president who can govern. That raises some issues in terms of geographical appeal, in terms of loyalty and so forth. So it's going to be very interesting to see what watches. I think what will happen now, as the news media realizes the chances for a contested election in both parties is slimmer, that they will then begin to focus on trying to determine and have an impact on who the vice presidential nominees will be. I think there's another interesting thing to think about going forward, and that is, will voter fatigue set in? Has it already set in terms of, this is more than a 16-week run in terms of the nominating process. So are we just going to move away from elections for a while? I think both parties will have to decide what their stance is going to be, both going into the convention and coming out of the convention in terms of advertising and the actual campaign. So as I've mentioned, barring any unexpected results or developments over the next month or two, it will be Clinton versus Trump for the fall election. Three important points. One, choice of VP. The vice presidential choice will be important to each, and the factors that they use in making that determination will be important. It will also have an impact on the subsequent campaign and elections. So it'll be very interesting to see. Also the timing, since the Democratic convention follows the Republican convention, the Democrat, Mrs. Clinton, will have the advantage of knowing for sure who the Republicans nominate as Trump's vice president. That's first thing. Second thing, both of them have major decisions to make about the financial aspects of the campaign. The length of the campaign, of this campaign for Mrs. Clinton, has meant that she has had to spend more money this spring than she had anticipated. This means that she will have to raise additional funds for the fall. For Donald Trump, it also means he has to make the decision as to how he's going to finance a campaign in the fall. One of his selling points is he does not take money from corporations. He's self-funded. Will he continue to be self-funded when he needs to raise several hundred millions of dollars in order to run a campaign? That remains to be seen. It will be very interesting to see these developments. So far, none of the media is really focused on this, but it's something that they ought to be paying some attention to. And then the last point I would simply raise is, will voter fatigue set in? Has this nomination gone on so long, been so contested on both parties' part, that for many Americans, enough, they want to move on with their lives? Well, as soon as the conventions are over, the candidates will have to decide when they start their campaign. Remember, the Olympics will be taking place up through the first to the middle part of August. That'll probably mean most of the candidates may delay, but in the past they have left the conventions, when the conventions have been later, and launched their campaigns immediately. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens. So sets us up for a very interesting election in the fall. I want to remind you that the massive open online course, Road to the White House, will continue this fall. There'll be a separate section offered. Look for it in early September. I hope you'll join us. Also, there'll be a MOOC this summer talking about the conventions. So look for that if you go to openlearning.blackboard.com. You can find it under Pace University, under institutions, and I hope to see you then. Thank you for being part of this course, and I hope that it's lived up to the expectations. Thank you.